Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with Satori Prime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. So if you haven't signed up to our PEP list to receive a recap email about this week's shows, make sure you head over to performancepodcasts.com. That's podcasts with an S at the end of it. So make sure you remember that. You can even pick up 6 hours of subliminal training when you sign up. That basically means now you can work on things like speed reading, memory, and even how to be more decisive through subliminal messaging just by listening. So make sure you do that. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to our show via iTunes, you can also do that at performancepodcasts.com/iTunes. Or if you prefer to use Stitcher, you can do the same thing at performancepodcasts.com/Stitcher. And remember, we have new episodes coming out every Monday and Thursday morning, so you can grab those then. Lastly, if you want to keep up with everything that we do at Satori Prime, you can always head over to our main site, satoriprime.com, and roam around. We have a ton of free content that we constantly update. And if any of you are looking for some mentorship around your marketing efforts, and I'm talking specifically about Facebook paid marketing on how you can use that to double, triple, or even quadruple your business, then we do actually have a couple of masterminds we run that can absolutely transform your marketing efforts in less than 90 days. So you can check those out by applying to see if you're a fit for one of them at satoriprime.com/mastermind. And with that, let's kick off today's show. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to part 2 interview with Scott Britton, host of the Competitive Edge podcast and serial entrepreneur. If you haven't heard part 1, his story is really quite outrageous. Captain of the Princeton football team after getting there from, middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, which is pretty wild, had his world blown open, and then first job out, has a crazy job in the sports agency world, ends up leaving that after 4 months and sleeping on a couch in an office in New York just so he can commute, which I'm sure his parents loved, being the captain of the Princeton team. But anyway, he shared his incredible journey of businesses that he's been a part of, and how actually one of the last ones he was a part of sold for $100 million, which is incredible. And then now in part 2, he's going to share with us what he's working on right now and the intricacies of that, and then also lessons that he's learned and failures that he's had and how we can grow from that. So enjoy part 2, and I'll see you on the next Performance Enhancing Podcast.
So I'm super, I guess when I left the software company after we sold and stuck around for a year, I got in the information marketing world, teaching a lot of people about business development, outbound lead generation, using the strategies that we did at Single Platform. And I honestly, for the past year, I've been traveling, I've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But what I most recently have been excited about and doing for the past 2 months is this fitness concept called peak state. So and I know that there's all these habits and things that we do on a daily basis to make us feel awesome, right?
Yeah.
It could be reconnecting with your why. It could be being grateful. It could be visualizing your success, whatever it is. But for most people, myself at times, doing these things every day with the regularity that we need to is just really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I went to a Unleash Power Within Tony Robbins event. I felt so on fire, and I was ready to conquer the world. No fear, no doubts, totally unrestrained. And a week later, I kind of just fell into malaise.
Same old.
Yeah. And, it wasn't because he didn't give me good strategies to put myself into that feeling, into that state. it's because I wasn't diligent enough about taking the time and really executing them with the intensity that it requires to feel that way. So I thought about what reoccurring activities I could put these practices in that I use to really get myself feeling empowered and get my mind right. And the thing that I do most besides shower and eat is work out. So the concept of peak state is very simple. It's to put empowerment and success habits in before, in, during, and after high intensity workouts. And what's really cool is that there's actually a bunch of science around what happens to the brain when you're working out.
Yeah.
When you're doing high intensity workouts, high intensity cardio, your brain's actually in a hyperplastic state. It's like the same state. Maybe people here that meditate have heard that the neuroplasticity is increased in meditation. When you're working out, like it's just as much or not even more so, which is easier to create new memories. It's easier to learn faster. It's easier to change your beliefs and how you feel about yourself.
Wow.
Create those new neural pathways. So it's actually the prime time to do things like visualize your success, to state how you want to show up in the world, to affirm it with power. So what I've been doing for the past 2 months has been renting out yoga studios in New York City and testing this concept with groups of people and really honing it and refining it to its current iteration where it is today. So it's been really cool, really interesting. It's also been a great lesson to me as, listen, I've done software, I've done information marketing, I've done one-on-one coaching. I've worked for, when we got bought, I worked for a public company. This has been an interesting experiment is what is it like to run a location-centric business where you have to show up every single time because people are, you sign up for your class.
Interesting.
So it's been a fascinating experiment, and so far the feedback has been pretty awesome. It's been pretty amazing.
So you're starting, this is project number, 4 or 5?
So my main source of income is all the information marketing on my website, which is lifelonglearner.com. Honestly, I'm super blessed in that allows me to, it's pretty automated at this point, and allows me to basically have a lot of time freedom.
Nice.
So I have that. The real passion of that site is the podcast, The Competitive Edge, which I know it's just really cool to just hop on people. And then this project, Peak State, is, I'm not sure whether this is going to be like my next full-time thing, because let's be real, like starting Zumba or CrossFit, that's a 15-year commitment.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen overnight. Starting an entirely new thing is a huge commitment. And so I don't know how this is going to unfold, but I know that I really enjoy doing it and I think it needs to exist and people are fired up about it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that's why I was laughing at the resume thing. It's like all these things that you've done have actually crafted you into someone who is able to look at this thing from so many different angles and create something truly holy and new, which doesn't exist. And that only comes from, your background as a collegiate super athlete, tech startups, software, all mindset, like all these worlds are kind of melding together. So that's the reason that it's impressive to have that kind of resume, because if you didn't, this wouldn't be happening.
Dude, thanks, man. I was talking to a mentor yesterday and I was just telling him my frustration because listen, sometimes I'll host these classes and they'll be, it'll be a full class. Sometimes I'll show up and it'll be me and 2 people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like really a hard thing for somebody when you have friends who you're just as capable of selling their company to Groupon the week before, and you're hanging out with 2 people in a gym classroom and losing money because you're renting out the space. He said, like, listen, this is all part of your journey. Like all this stuff is helping you become and be who you need to be. And like, there's going to be a moment when that you're exactly where you need to be, and it's going to be huge.
Yes.
And it's going to be big and you're going to kick the door down.
Yeah.
So don't worry about this. This was kind of cool because the workout's called Peak State. He's like, don't worry about like if things aren't like working perfectly right now, like just live every day in a peak state, do as much as you can to help other people. And one day, like before you know it, like you're going to be where you're supposed to be and it's going to be huge. And that to me was just like, thank you. I needed to hear that. That's super comforting. And honestly, I think it's true. Like, you know, if you commit to just being willing to push it and or die trying, like forever, like eventually it's going to work.
Yeah. It's interesting. Can I offer you one other insight in that situation?
Please, I welcome any and all.
Okay. So every experience, you're well aware of this. Every experience is an opportunity for you to learn something. Okay. So my assertion when that happens is Scott Britton, like the higher self version of you is not at all affected because what you're up to is accomplishing your vision, your mission, right? Who's affected at that moment when two people show up is ego.
Totally.
Right? Okay. So if you know that, and I'm sure you know that, and you can put that aside, right? But like your mission, your vision is to create something amazing in the world. A completely different perspective on that same situation is when you have two people, that means that you can go so much deeper with those two people to actually hone your craft. Because if you have to disperse yourself to 15, 20 people at a time, right? You can't really focus on 15, 20 people. The energy kind of takes over, right? You're like, that's what you're creating. But with two people, you can go so much deeper. Kind of like if you were sitting at dinner with 20 people, you're not connecting with 20 people. You're connecting with the 2, 3, 4 around you. So that you could have that same instance and look at it as opportunity to just completely hone that skill.
Yeah. Like where is the treasure in this experience?
Exactly. Great question. Beautiful. I love that. So, okay. What has been the biggest challenge that you faced right now in this new venture?
I think having the courage to do it originally.
Okay.
So listen, I have again, this is a lot of ego stuff I've had to work through.
Yeah.
I have an expectation amongst my peers in New York City, and it's, Scott, you're coming back. Awesome. Like, what's your next software company going to be? What's it going to do? Like, let's talk, whatever. Like I know a couple good companies are going to run biz dev for you. When I send emails to those people, the thought of me sending emails to those people and inviting them to a class where I lead them in meditation, and then at certain points ask them to scream out their whatever mantra we've established was very scary for me.
Yeah.
Right. Like that is like, this is something I've never seen other people do. This is something that a side of me that a lot of people didn't know. And for me to be like, you know what, whatever, I'm going to do it. I'm going to risk looking like a fool because I need to see if this exists. Wow. That was really hard, dude.
Wow. So how did you, what process did you go through to get to that level? So I got some leverage on myself. So originally how this started was I was in San Diego, and I told my roommate about this idea at the time, and I was like, let's go to this park and let's try this. And it started off very basic, like just like setting an intention to think about before the workout. And, that kind of ramped up to like, verbally forcefully verbal affirmations during the workouts. And I was like, okay, I need to like invite other people to this. And that kind of feels weird. And my buddy, Carl Mattiola, you might know him. I know him. Yep.
He was having a mastermind in Austin, Texas. And it was just like 20 entrepreneurs were going to be there. I know they all deal with this mental stuff. Just like, fear, limiting beliefs, doubt, all this stuff. I know that this was like my target audience, and Carl knew that I was doing these workouts in San Diego because I told him about it at a dinner. And I was like, hey man, he invited me to my mastermind. I was like, that's cool. Can I do some of my workouts? And for me, that was like, he's like, yeah, sure. And I booked my ticket, and I was like, all right, listen, he just told everybody I'm going to do the workout. I booked my ticket. Like, there's no way I'm getting out of this now.
You're on the hook.
I'm on the hook. And, I went there and I did the workout, and people loved it. And it was just like a strategy. My strategy has always been whenever I'm like feeling like I can't get it done, or I'm nervous or plagued with doubt, I just figure out a way to get leverage on myself. And that in this instance was committing to doing this, and having that person tell other people. And, I didn't want to be incongruent with what I said I was going to do. So I had to do it. And that gave me the confidence that did two things. One, it gave me confidence when I came to New York, but also every single person there was like, you have to do this. You have to do this. And I was like, I felt like I was, as an entrepreneur and somebody who is like, tries to live authentically, I felt that if I would be like letting those people down if I didn't at least go to New York and try this. So that was like a huge lever for me to come to New York and push through the discomfort.
Beautiful. Do you ever listen to Ty Lopez?
No, I haven't, but it's really funny you bring that up, because the same guy who told me that the door is going to be big and you're going to kick it down was just getting together with Ty Lopez and telling me how awesome he was.
Okay. So it's no coincidence that his name is popping up in your life. But he has an amazing concept that he calls it like a 3-circle model, where you kind of look at your life from all these different perspectives, and you start to see where in the middle, what you're working on is your life's true purpose. Like, is this your life's true purpose? So as I'm just kind of listening, and as I've heard you speak on other things and just been following you for a bit, what my brain is telling me from what I'm seeing is like, you were in this physical world for a long time, and we didn't get into how you hurt yourself and how you had to like try to figure out and get smarter to be faster and all these kind of things. But you have that side. You have this business side. Now you're dealing with entrepreneurs and business development and all that stuff. And you're starting to see the limiting beliefs and the things that are holding people back. You go through your own process. And it's funny that like all of it is coming together into this thing, which, like you said, I don't know if this is necessarily the thing that will be your life's project, but it's a damn good self-expression of every other piece that I've seen in your life. And I just think you're going to find magic in this practice.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And it's been interesting because a lot of my friends, to echo that, have come to the class and been like, dude, this is just so you.
There you go.
This is you.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's cool. It's cool, positive affirmation. I'm going to ask you a question.
Please.
What's been the hardest thing you had to do launching Satori Prime?
I mean, look, I think it's all mental. So when we launched Satori Prime, my brother was in marketing space for about 6 or so months before me. He's the one that approached me after an event and was like, look, I think together we can really do something amazing. At the time, in 2010, I'd closed up my bank, was basically living on welfare basically for a few months till that ran out, and then just burning through savings for the rest of the time. My house was being foreclosed on. I had a young kid. And I remember just the moment where like I got served with foreclosure papers, and my wife and her grandparents were actually standing there right behind me. And I remember having to turn around, and right before I turned around, and I have that like moment, and I think that was my moment. That was the choosing moment, because I could have turned around I was crushed inside. And I chose at that moment whether this is something that I'm going to fight for. Like you said, you know, that was my low. That was the lowest point of my life. Whether I was going to fight for this, and I believe in this vision and mission enough to do this, because the easy thing, the comfort thing would have been to just go get some like desk jockey job, which I would have fucking hated and been miserable for the rest of my life and given up on this. That was the hardest thing. The hardest thing was not the technical or the doing it was the mental. It was the sticking to something. And to be honest, we didn't make a penny for probably the first 2 or so years. I mean, last year was the first year that we really it just started all of a sudden, inexplicably, I say, but I mean, it's kind of like when you figure out the amount of time and effort, kind of like your buddy, you know, like you grind, and all of a sudden it's like, whoop. That was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
By far.
Dude. Well, man, that conviction to keep going.
It's everything.
Dude.
It's everything. You know, it's and it's funny. I love the line where I tell every entrepreneur, you pretty much have to jump off the cliff and just try to figure out how to fly on your way down. What no one tells you is that you're going to figure out how to fly when you're like here. It's not like, woo-wee. It's always like, I'm going to get as close to the freaking ground. And then it's going to, all of a sudden you make that leap.
Dude. Yeah. I mean, you know, I had a friend, I feel like this conversation I had yesterday with this mentor of mine, his name is Ted Ailing, by the way. He's a total badass. He sold his company for $500 million last year.
Wow.
He, not to like be like one of these people who, you know, talks about that stuff, but I just want to assert that he's a badass.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He said, like, you know, man, like, sometimes you're just too comfortable. Like, and that's kind of like indicative of like, if you're too comfortable, like until you're incredibly uncomfortable, you might just be coasting, right? Yeah. You might just be like, oh, this flight's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Like, look at the ground. Oh, there's my mom's house. Like,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like you're 10 feet and you're like, listen, I need to do something or else I'm going to face, you know, a foreclosure or shame or just like, I'm going to do something I don't want to actually have to do.
Yep.
And man, like that kind of comes back to the idea that kind of where we started on here, just getting leverage on yourself. Like I love the story of Tony Robbins, like, you know, not having that much money in the bank and just saying, screw it, I'm going to rent out the Delray Castle and just being like, this is going to cause me to figure out a way to make money.
Yeah.
And 12 months later, he was a millionaire.
Yeah.
And I'd say that everybody does that, has that much of a fairy tale, but it's certainly something to think about and a strategy that you can employ if you're not achieving at the level that you want to be.
Yeah. And, you know, there's people that email me all the time about the podcast and share amazing things with me and ask me all sorts of questions. I think the biggest differentiating factor after having done this podcast for a year and interviewing a slew of incredible people, the biggest difference maker I've seen is the willingness to throw themselves off a cliff, the willingness to do what others look at, like we said before, as you're fucking crazy. And I feel like if you're not getting that in your life, then you're living comfortably. And, you know, think about this. We've surrounded ourselves with incredible people, right? This incredible mentor that you have. We share a bunch of friends who are incredibly successful entrepreneurs. If you're in that circle and people are still looking at you going like, you're fucking crazy, you know you're doing something right. You're really pushing the envelope. So, yeah, I mean, kudos to you. I want to ask you this one last question that we ask every one of our guests.
Let's do it.
Even though I'm just floored by how young and savvy and smart and like hungry.
Dude, you're making me blush.
No, but you have such a fire to make shit happen. Yeah. So amazing. So
Thank you, brother.
even in the time that you've lived on this short earth, is there something that you wish you would have known back then that you know now?
Yes. Man, there's so much. There's one, a lot of times I feel like these questions, really get answered with what you've learned recently that you wish you knew.
It's fine.
And, I just read a book recently that's just really blown my mind. Have you read 80/20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall?
Perry Marshall. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I've always been kind of a guy who's always running and gunning, right?
Yeah.
And that's helped me get a lot done. It's also helped me to spend an inordinate amount of time on things that aren't actually important. And I'm pretty familiar with the 80/20 principle. I have tried to exercise it in my decision making. But what really blew my mind in that book was this idea that if you 80/20 the 80/20, because that is a curve, that is a fractal, that actually 4% of your efforts account for 64% of your results. And 80/20 is pretty powerful, but I was literally like, dude, if 4% is counting for more than 64% of the things that I'm doing, like, that's insane. And I had to stop what I was doing and then look at all these different things. Like, look at my income, look at the opportunities I've had and who's distributed those to me. Like, look at things like where I've met the women that I really like are, and all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's true. There is like a small amount of levers in every single part of what's already working that are so powerful. And so now I'm just like, not only trying to just be more aware of what are like the big wins, but also like in those big wins, what is influencing them the most? Like, what's the second degree lever of the big lever?
Wow.
And for me, like, I've started to implement this in my business and my time. And I have more time. I feel less stressed out. I feel things moving faster. And it's awesome. So it's like 80/20 squared. I wish I had taken the 80/20 rule more seriously, and then also seen this curve, right, that really highlighted that 4% that was even more compelling for me to start prioritizing appropriately.
I like that. So I'm going to ask, which I usually don't, but I'm going to ask a follow-up question because I really like what you just said there. What would you have physically done differently? So knowing that rule, knowing that like 4%. So take me back to some experience or something. Because I want, for people that I read the book, so I kind of have a background, but our listeners probably don't. And it might just sound theoretical. Is there an example, like when you were dissecting and looking at stuff, you could just be like, here's the concrete. I want them to understand how good this concept is.
Yeah. So like, for example, like when I was doing business development partnerships at Single Platform, and my job was essentially create a deal that distributed our data to publisher websites. And then that allowed us to sell more. So what I was trying to do was like, listen, I'm going to get a deal with everybody. And I spent a little bit more time on the big ones than the little ones, but I was still spending all this time on all these things. So in retrospect, what I would have done was I would have just focused on those top 20% of like clients. And then I would have focused on the top 20% of those and just try to figure out how that were most willing to like do things with us that enhance the value of our business, and figured out how I could create value there.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and that, by the way, would have created way more value for the business than all these other things I was spending time on.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have done that. And then to even extrapolate further, I wish I would have, in the process to get those deals, I wish I would have done an 80-20 where it's like, I was just like firing off cold emails all day and calling people. I wish I would have been like, how did I get these bigger deals? Okay. Like, let's just use that process. And then that process, how can I make that 80% more effective?
Yeah.
And, just continue. It's like, you're just zooming in, constantly zooming. And I mean, it just would have saved me a ton of time. Like,
amazing.
We're still successful, but we would have just been successful way faster. Yeah.
It's interesting. I've shared this story before, but when we were in my finance world, I was responsible for bringing in sales, and we grew the company from starting in 2004. 2004, we shut the doors like midway through 2010. So like 6.5 years. We started with $500,000 and we were by the end about 100 million plus in assets under management.
Wow.
And during that time, I did not read one sales book. I did not go to one sales seminar. Like, I did Landmark and stuff like that, personal development stuff, which really excited me. But when we got into this world, like when we started building Satori Prime, it was so important for me. There's not enough time in my day to read and watch and listen to as many things as I want to do, because it's just so much information out there. I now feel like I know nothing. And I just thought, kind of like you said, I wish I would have even had some sort of insight to reverse engineer what was a process that actually worked. What made this transaction successful? What made this conversation successful? And then reverse engineer that and hone it in. Now, and in the marketing world, you and I both know everything is tracked. Like, we track everything. And because of that data, we can make decisions time and time again into these like little micro sections, which impact the whole. So right. I think it ultimately comes down to, you can do the 80-20 thing, but if you're not even tracking your life, for example, like, I get on to a sales call and I pretty much have like a certain process that I want to have go through with someone, right? Like certain questions that I want to ask them, things like that. And I call them like selling stories, where you say something to someone and it might be completely off the cuff and they really resonated with it. Like, something really triggered. Well, what I've trained myself to do is take that and then go and do it again and see if that will work with the next person and the next person and the next person. And if it does, now you have something.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's really like, I think say it again?
So that's good, man.
That 80-20 rule is massive. It really is massive. I'll put the links, by the way, to both those books. So the 80-20 rule is by Perry Marshall. And then the other one, just to be clear here, the 12-week year. Do you remember who that was by? I can look it up.
I don't. It's 12weekyear.com. It's on Amazon. You'll see it. It's an amazing book. Anybody who wants to like set goals and is also like, oh crap, the year already started, I guess I shouldn't. Well, this is a weekly thing. So you have 52, so you're still in the window to set goals. So.
My brother said the best line I've used all in 2014 was, now is the second best time to start. 10 years ago would have been better. All right. So Scott, where can people find you?
So my main site where I have my podcast, The Competitive Edge, and writing is lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. And if you're interested in learning more about the integrated mind, body, empowerment, fitness concept, just go to peakstatefit.com. And I just want to thank you for having me on here, man. It's been such a blast.
Absolutely, man. It was great. Definitely, I highly recommend your podcast. It's awesome. You have amazing guests on there, really great interviews. Scott was actually the person that introduced me to Brian Smith from UGG. So
awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool. And yeah, thank you for being on here. I can't wait to see where Peak State goes. I know where it's going. I just want to see how it materializes. That's the better way to say it.
Nice, man. Love it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on here, man.
Thanks, brother.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.
Did you run through doors till you hit the floor? Did you read my eyes and my aching thoughts? Did you walk through walls till you had to grow? Oh my God, your smile and my soundless call.